is the court then got in gear and sped things up, and we got into this wide-scale busing that everybody, of course, in most cities and here in Asheville lived through, which did a lot of desegregation in the South, not very much in northern urban cities like Detroit. The court basically decided, well, they don't have a Jim Crow history. They don't have to expand beyond the city limits, and then the numbers did it. Demographics, the cities turn blacker, the suburbs are whiter, the schools are in here, the whites aren't there to integrate with, so that the country started looking alike, the South and the northern cities looking more alike. And in the last decade and a half, that's pretty much been the case and been frustrating as urban school systems got blacker. And so in that sense, Oklahoma City was the same, but they'd had a Jim Crow history, but they'd been under court orders for 25, 30 years. So many of these, they just, essentially the court's been kind of running the schools or running oversight over the school boards, and it was an unnatural, semi-permanent, you're always in court. Normally there's a violation, a remedy, and you get out, because courts have to keep going. And so that was frustrating to everybody. The courts got tired, school boards didn't like it, nobody was very happy. And so in the Dowell case, the school board, and they couldn't reach out beyond city limits very easily, they said, we've done the best we can. We've got magnet schools, we've got a certain amount of desegregation, not as much as anyone would have hoped 20 years ago, certainly when Brown happened. But we're not much more we can do. Money's a problem, and we want to concentrate on doing a good job rather than being controlled by courts in a numbers game that often was requiring the blacks to go further on the bus and travel further. And so some of the black parents were saying, we don't like it either. And it's sort of insulting because it means our neighborhood school can't really be any good because there's not enough whites in it or any whites in it, or, you know, you got that argument. And all of that added up to a turning to the courts to say, can't we get out of this judge-run situation, try to run our own, and in that case, and this is a more conservative Supreme Court, was sympathetic and said, and they said, that is a plausible and ultimately desirable thing to do, and we think basically yes, but that ought to be decided by your local judge. So they didn't ring a clarion bell and say, we now are going to back away from Brown. They said, at some point, courts have to get out of this. I think they were, in fact, saying we were a lot more limited than we thought. We can't, judges just can't change society quite that much when other forces. So they sent it back to the local judge. They're still trying to decide now. That's going to be happening everywhere. It's going to happen here. It's going to happen in all these cities. Probably should happen. I'm a historian. What it's going to produce, I don't know.
Very good. And so there are many things that are still happening in this whole battle of desegregation. Let's look at, during this last 3 or 4 minutes that we have, Doctor, let's look at one of the things in terms from a constitutional point of view and from a scholarly civil rights era point of view. And one of the things that we've already mentioned somewhat, and that is this idea of choice. I think you've already indicated that choice really did not come off too well the first time that it was tried. Now, why don't you give our audience some idea of what people are talking about now when they talk about choice, and try to compare what they're saying about choice today with choice that existed during the with all deliberate speed kind of concept.
Well, that's, wow, I'll try. Let me talk about my understanding of the current choice movement tends to come more from the conservative side of the spectrum, but not entirely. That is, there's an interesting and curious sort of coalition here of traditional conservatives who are for market forces and choice and some urban black places like Minneapolis and that have decided the whites have all fled, we're still here, we've got to have schools, and our schools aren't any good. And it doesn't seem to be practical now to say, well, they aren't any good because we haven't got enough whites in them, and can we get some tomorrow? They're sort of not there. And anyway, we resent that. We want choice too, and maybe that will give us a weapon to use against these bureaucratic, swollen, tired school systems that don't seem to work very well. And so it's too early to say. They're experimenting locally, places like Milwaukee, and it's not clear that they can include private schools. We're going to be watching that. I don't know what will happen. It's interesting. I'm inclined to be encouraged that they're trying it, but I don't have an opinion yet.
Very good. And Doctor, let me thank you during this last minute for coming by and giving us that information today. And why don't you give us the title for that paperback production of this Pulitzer Prize nominated book, The Civil Rights Era, and sort of let us close out on that.
I'd be happy to. It's called Civil Rights and the Presidency, and it covers race and gender. So it's from 1960 to 1972, and it's about that thick rather than that thick, and it's a paperback, and I'm very happy with it. I'm glad you gave me a chance to give it a shot.
No, I think that it's a very, very important book, and we know that you've done quite a bit of work in that area, and so it's the kind of book that we want people to know about, and we want people to know more about you, even though this is your home. You're from Nashville,
I'm from Nashville.
In a real sense, really from Arkansas, I think.
Well, my memories are of Tennessee, and they're fond memories. I'm glad to be back.
Very good, and of course, let me thank you for coming by and giving us that information today. I think that our audience should have a fairly good idea of some of the things that were involved with this Brown decision, and we do hope to show this at the appropriate time that will sort of make people remember of the Brown decision. Even though you've put quite a bit of emphasis upon the 1955 decision, I think that most of us remember the 1954 decision as the great Brown decision that opened up the way and perhaps did quite a bit to help undermine the system of segregation.
And we're right to do so.
Very good, and we certainly appreciate you coming by and giving us that kind of information. I think we've got about 30 seconds. Have you got any final comment that you'd like to make over the last 30 seconds?
Well, you put me on the spot. I'm just delighted to be here.
Very good.
Delighted to be back in Nashville. And delighted to try to figure out the road system in this town. I still can't find myself around, but it's a much more sophisticated city, and it's a pleasure.
Very good, and let us thank you very much for coming by and giving us that information. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.
Little guys